You know what nobody tells you about turning 80? That the money fears don't disappear, they just change shape. I used to worry about building wealth. Now I worry about outliving it. I still remember that morning 3 years ago. I woke up in a cold sweat at 4:37 a.m., my heart racing like I was 30 again, but not in a good way. My wife Martha was sleeping peacefully beside me, unaware that I had just calculated for the 5th time that week how many years our savings might last if the market crashed again like in 2008. The answer kept coming up short, too short. For 47 years, I worked as an accountant. Numbers were my life. I helped countless clients prepare for retirement. I created beautiful spreadsheets and projections. I thought I knew everything about money, but when I finally retired at 68, I realized knowing about money and managing your own retirement are entirely different beasts. My name is Richard Wilson. I've lived through 12 presidents, watched Neil Armstrong walk on the moon, survived 2 heart attacks, and buried more friends than I care to count. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because at 83, I've made every financial mistake possible, and I've watched others make even worse ones. And today, I want to save you from the same fate. Let me tell you about my friend, Jack. Brilliant man. Built a successful construction company from nothing. Had millions when he retired at 62. 10 years later, he was moving into his daughter's basement. Richard, he told me over coffee, his hands shaking slightly. I never thought I'd be a burden to my kids. I had it all figured out. His voice cracked. But I didn't plan for 20 years of retirement. I planned for 10. That conversation haunted me for months. I had it all figured out. Don't we all think that? But life has a way of unraveling even the most carefully laid plans. When I turned 70, I made a promise to myself. I would master retirement finances not just for me, but for Martha, for our children, and now for you. Because the stakes are too high to get this wrong. The first thing you need to understand is that retirement planning isn't about money. Not really. It's about time. When you're working, time creates money. When you're retired, time consumes money. That shift is profound, and many people never truly grasp it until it's too late. I remember sitting with my financial advisor shortly after retiring. His name was Kevin. Nice young man, probably in his 40s, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He showed me colorful graphs projecting our retirement income. "You'll be fine," he said with a confident smile. "Just fine." But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty perhaps, that kept me up that night. The next morning, I sat at our kitchen table with a legal pad and a cup of black coffee. Martha was in the garden, humming to herself as she tended to her roses. Through the window, I could see the sunlight catching in her silver hair. 47 years together, and she still took my breath away. I thought about our dreams, traveling to Italy, spoiling our grandchildren, living comfortably without worry. And I thought about Jack, moving into his daughter's basement. No, I whispered to myself, that won't be us. I spent the next 6 months learning everything I could about retirement finance. I read books, took courses, interviewed successful retirees, and even sat down with 3 different financial advisors to get multiple perspectives. What I learned changed everything. And it all boils down to 7 essential truths I wish I'd understood decades earlier. The first truth is painful but necessary. Your retirement will likely last longer than you think and cost more than you imagine. When I was born in 1941, the average life expectancy was about 65 years. Today, if you make it to 65, you can reasonably expect to live into your mid-80s or beyond. That's potentially 20 to 30 years of retirement. My father worked until he died at 62. He never spent a day retired. But here I am, 15 years into retirement with potentially another decade ahead of me. I remember talking to my son William about this. "Dad," he said, "you're planning like you'll live to 100. I laughed and told him, "The problem isn't if I die early, it's if I don't." The silence that followed told me he hadn't considered that perspective. Martha and I sat down and calculated what our actual retirement might cost, assuming we both lived to 95. The number was staggering, nearly $2 million more than we had anticipated. That's when I realized most retirement planning focuses on accumulation. How much can you save? But successful retirement is about distribution. How long can it last? The second truth came to me through pain and nearly cost us everything. Inflation is retirement's silent killer. Most people underestimate its impact. I certainly did. In 1980, Martha and I bought our home for $65,000. Today, that same house is worth over $450,000. That's not because our house got better. It's because dollars got weaker. Now apply that same principle to your retirement income. I remember my mother's retirement in the 1980s. She had a pension of $1,100 a month, which seemed substantial then. By the time she passed in 2002, that same $1,200 barely covered her basic needs. I watched her cut corners, choose between medications, and groceries, and gradually lose her financial independence all while her income stayed exactly the same on paper. Even safe inflation of 3% annually will cut your purchasing power in half in about 24 years. At 83, I've watched a dollar shrink to the value of a quarter from when I first started working. The turkey sandwich I enjoyed for lunch yesterday cost $12. I remember when that same sandwich was 75 cents. During our second year of retirement, Martha and I went on a cruise to Alaska, something we dreamed about for years. We met a lovely couple, Shirley and Tom, from Minnesota, both retired, teachers with solid pensions. They seemed to have it made. We kept in touch through Christmas cards and occasional phone calls. 5 years later, I called Tom to wish him a happy birthday, and the strain in his voice was unmistakable. "Richard," he confided after some small talk, "we're having to move to a smaller place. The pension looked good on paper, but it doesn't increase with inflation. We're falling behind a little more each year." That conversation led to the third truth. Traditional retirement income strategies need rethinking. The old formula shift to bonds and CDs as you age may no longer work in a world of longer retirements and persistent inflation. When I retired, I initially followed conventional wisdom. I moved much of our portfolio to safe investments, bonds, CDs, money market accounts. The financial press called it the retirement red zone. Those 5 years before and after retirement, when you can't afford to take big risks, it seemed prudent. Then came 2009. Interest rates plummeted. Suddenly, the safe 5 to 6% returns I had counted on from bonds and CDs dropped to 1 to 2%. Our income was cut by more than half, but our expenses kept rising. I remember walking into our local bank, the same one I'd used for 30 years, and speaking with Susan, the manager. "What options do we have for better returns?" I asked. She slid a rate sheet across her desk apologetically. The best CD was paying 1.2% annually. "That won't even keep up with inflation," I said. She nodded sadly. "I know, Mr. Wilson. My parents are facing the same problem." That night, I couldn't sleep. I went to our study and looked at our financial plan again. At those interest rates, we would run out of money by our early 80s. I was 71 at the time. The math was terrifying. This led me to completely rethink our approach. After considerable research and consultation, we restructured our portfolio to include more growth investments, even in retirement. Not recklessly, but strategically, with a portion dedicated to outpacing inflation over the long term. Some of our friends thought we were crazy. "Stocks at your age," my golf buddy Frank said, shaking his head. 2 years later, that same Frank called to ask how we'd restructured our investments. His safe approach was slowly drowning him. This brings me to the fourth truth, one that took me decades to fully appreciate. Tax planning doesn't end with retirement. It transforms, and failing to master this transformation can cost you tens of thousands of dollars. During my working years, tax planning was relatively straightforward. Maximize deductions, contribute to tax-advantaged accounts, defer income when possible. But in retirement, the game changes completely. I learned this lesson the hard way during our first year of retirement. I needed some extra cash for a new roof, so I withdrew $25,000 from my IRA. Simple enough, I thought. Then April came, and I nearly fell out of my chair when I saw our tax bill. That simple withdrawal pushed us into a higher tax bracket, increased the taxes on our Social Security benefits, and even resulted in higher Medicare premiums the following year. What I thought was a $25,000 withdrawal effectively cost us close to $35,000 when all was said and done. Why didn't anyone warn me about this? I asked our tax preparer, a soft-spoken man named Michael, who had the patience of a saint. "Most people don't think about tax diversification until it's too late," he explained. "Where you take your retirement income from matters as much as how much you take." That conversation was worth its weight in gold. It led me to develop a systematic withdrawal strategy that minimized our tax burden by carefully choreographing which accounts we drew from each year. Some years we took more from Roth accounts, others from taxable accounts, and others from traditional IRAs, all coordinated to keep us in the lowest possible tax bracket. I remember explaining this strategy to my daughter Laura over dinner. She's a surgeon, brilliant with medicine, but admittedly overwhelmed by financial matters. "Dad, this sounds incredibly complicated," she said, looking concerned. "It is," I admitted, "but so is performing surgery. The difference is, you train for years to master surgery. Most of us never get proper training for retirement income planning." She nodded thoughtfully. 2 weeks later, she called to say she'd scheduled an appointment with a financial planner who specializes in retirement income strategies. That may have been one of the most valuable conversations I've ever had with my daughter. The fifth truth came to me through observation and countless conversations with fellow retirees. Health care costs will likely be your biggest expense and greatest financial risk in retirement. Martha and I thought we were well prepared. We had Medicare, a good supplement policy, and even some long-term care insurance. We felt protected. Then my old college roommate Edward developed Parkinson's disease. I visited him in Phoenix 3 years after his diagnosis. We sat in his sunroom, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. His hands trembled slightly as he sipped his iced tea. "The disease isn't the worst part, Richard," he said quietly. "It's the cost. Medicare doesn't cover most of what I need. The medications, the therapy, the home modifications, the part-time care, it's all coming out of pocket." Sarah and I had saved $1.2 million for retirement. We've gone through nearly $300,000 in just 3 years. I felt a chill despite the Arizona heat. Edward and Sarah had done everything right, saved diligently, invested wisely, lived modestly. Yet here they were, watching their retirement security erode month by month, bill by bill. When I returned home, Martha and I had a difficult conversation about our own health care planning. We increased our long-term care coverage, established a dedicated health care fund separate from our regular retirement savings, and researched which continuing care communities might suit us if the need arose. More importantly, we began tracking our health expenses meticulously. What we discovered surprised us. Even in relatively good health, we were spending nearly $12.00 annually on out-of-pocket health care costs, far more than we had budgeted. This brings me to the sixth truth, perhaps the most difficult one to discuss. You need a plan for diminished capacity. No one likes to think about cognitive decline, but the statistics are sobering. If you live into your 80s, the odds of experiencing some form of cognitive impairment increase dramatically. I've watched too many friends make catastrophic financial mistakes, in their later years falling for scams, making impulsive decisions, forgetting to pay important bills, or being taken advantage of by unscrupulous advisors. My friend Eleanor, sharp as a tack well into her 70s, began making uncharacteristic financial decisions at 82. She donated $50,000 to a questionable charity. She bought timeshares she didn't need. She invested in her nephew's harebrained business scheme. By the time her children realized what was happening, nearly 40% of her retirement savings was gone. Martha and I determined not to let that happen to us. We created a comprehensive incapacity plan that included a financial power of attorney, with specific limitations and oversight, a revocable trust with professional and family co-trustee, simplified finances, consolidating accounts, and automating essential bills, regular family meetings about our finances with our children, a financial care directive outlining our wishes for financial management if we become incapacitated. Remember how uncomfortable our first family financial meeting was. Our son William kept checking his watch. Laura looked embarrassed when we discussed specifics. Our youngest, Robert, seemed almost angry that we were bringing it up. "This isn't about us not trusting you," I finally said. "It's about protecting you and protecting ourselves. If you don't know the plan, you can't help implement it when we need you most." By our third annual meeting, the atmosphere had completely changed. The kids asked thoughtful questions. They offered helpful suggestions. Robert even brought research about new estate planning techniques he thought might benefit us. What had begun as an awkward obligation had transformed into a family governance process that brought us closer together, which leads me to the seventh, and perhaps most important truth. The best financial planning harmonizes money and meaning. After decades of helping people with their finances, I've observed that those who align their spending with their deepest values are inevitably more satisfied in retirement, regardless of the size of their portfolio. Early in our retirement, Martha and I fell into what I now call the cruise ship trap. We took expensive vacations, bought new cars, renovated our kitchen, all the things we thought retired people were supposed to do. The spending brought brief pleasure but little lasting satisfaction. Then Martha's sister Caroline was diagnosed with breast cancer. We spent 3 months living near her in Colorado to help during her treatment. Those were difficult days filled with doctor appointments, meal preparations, and long talks late into the night. We spent very little money during that time, yet when I look back on our retirement, those 3 months stand among our most meaningful. That experience prompted us to rethink our retirement priorities. We drastically reduced spending on material goods and increased spending on experiences with family and contributions to causes we care deeply about. We established a small foundation that provides college scholarships to first-generation students, something that has brought us immeasurable joy as we've watched these young people flourish. I recall sitting in our living room with Martha on our 50th wedding anniversary. Our children had thrown us a beautiful party earlier in the day. As the evening quieted, we reflected on our life together. "Are you happy with how we've spent our retirement?" I asked her. She took my hand, her eyes bright in the soft lamplight. "We've done well," she said, "not just with our money, but with our time. That's the real currency of retirement, isn't it? How we spend our time." She was right. Of course, Martha usually is. Retirement planning that focuses solely on financial numbers misses the most important calculation: how to convert money into meaning, security into purpose, and savings into a legacy that outlives you. As I look back on my 83 years, I realize that true retirement security isn't just about having enough money, though that certainly matters. It's about creating systems that protect your resources while enabling them to fuel what matters most to you. Let me share some practical advice that brings these 7 truths together. First, plan for a retirement that lasts to age 95. Even if you don't think you'll live that long, it's far better to die with money left over than to outlive your resources. Second, inflation-proof your income by maintaining some growth investments throughout retirement. The old rules of shifting entirely to fixed income can be a recipe for disaster in a long retirement. Third, create tax diversity before you retire, having money in taxable, tax-deferred, and tax-free accounts gives you flexibility to manage your tax bracket in retirement. Fourth, budget realistically for health care. Take whatever you think you'll spend on health care in retirement and double it. You'll likely still underestimate it. Fifth, simplify your finances as you age. Consolidate accounts, automate essential bills, create clear records and instructions. Your loved ones will thank you. Sixth, protect yourself from yourself. Create structural safeguards against cognitive decline before you need them. Give trusted people limited authority to step in if necessary. Finally, spend according to your values, not external expectations. The happiest retirees I know aren't necessarily the wealthiest. They're the ones who use their money as a tool to express what matters most to them. I think about my friend Jack sometimes, living in his daughter's basement after his retirement funds ran dry. I think about Eleanor, who lost nearly half her savings through poor decisions as her cognitive abilities declined. I think about Edward and Sarah, watching Parkinson's disease drain their carefully accumulated resources. These cautionary tales aren't meant to frighten you. They're meant to motivate you to take action now, while you have time to implement these strategies. I wish someone had sat me down in my 40s or 50s and shared these truths with me. I would have made different decisions. I would have created more tax diversity. I would have planned more realistically for health care costs. I would have established protective structures earlier. But here's the wonderful thing about wisdom: even when it comes late, it still has value. In the 15 years since I retired, implementing these principles has completely transformed our financial security and peace of mind. At 83, I sleep soundly at night. Martha and I have enough. Our plan can weather the unexpected. We've created structures to protect our resources as we age. Most importantly, we use our money in ways that bring us genuine joy and create meaningful impact. 2 months ago, I received a letter from Jessica, one of the first recipients of our scholarship program. She had just completed medical school and was beginning her residency in pediatrics. "Your support changed the trajectory of my life," she wrote. "I promise to pay it forward." I showed the letter to Martha over breakfast. She read it silently, then looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "This," she said simply, "this is why we saved all those years." In that moment, I understood the ultimate truth about retirement planning. We don't save and invest just to have money. We do it to have choices, to create impact, to leave something behind that matters. If you remember nothing else from this conversation, remember this: retirement isn't the end of your financial journey, it's the beginning of a new phase that requires different strategies and perspectives. Master these 7 truths and you'll not only survive retirement, you'll thrive in it. And if you're watching this and thinking it's too late for you, let me assure you, it's not. I've seen people transform their retirement security in their 70s and even 80s. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. Your future self will thank you. As for me, I'm grateful for these years to reflect and share what I've learned. The poet Robert Browning wrote, "Grow old along with me. The best is yet to be, the last of life, for which the first was made." With proper planning and the right perspective, I've found this to be wonderfully true. The financial decisions we make don't just affect our bank accounts. They shape our experience of these precious later years and the legacy we leave behind. Thank you for listening to an old man's reflections. I hope they serve you well on your own journey. Remember, it's never too early to plan for retirement, and it's never too late to improve.